Greg Vines, thank you for visiting us here at Monash Business School, and in particular at the International Consortium for Research on Employment at Work, ICREW, part of our Centre for Global Business. We're honoured that the Deputy Director General of the International Labour Organisation has been willing to spare some time to come and give a seminar here today and discuss the important Future of Work Commission. So thank you for joining us. I wonder if you might start by giving us a little background about the International Labour Organisation, Greg.
Well, thanks very much, Greg. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Monash Business School. It's a place that I've visited many times in the past, and certainly the opportunity to come and speak with you and colleagues today about the ILO's work, and particularly around the future of work. The International Labour Organisation, created 100 years ago, 1919, so this is our centenary year. It was created as part of the Treaty of Versailles, of course the treaty that ended the First World War, together along with the League of Nations. So the two organisations that were established with the hope of future world peace were the League of Nations and the International Labour Organisation. And particularly from the ILO's point of view, the drafters of the Treaty of Versailles saw that really the only opportunity for lasting peace was through social justice. And so the ILO was given that mandate to pursue social justice, and uniquely in the international sphere, the multilateral organisations, we are the only organisation that not only brings together governments but also representatives of workers and employers from all of our member states. So it's quite a unique body. And over the last 100 years, our motto, if you like, has been advancing social justice through promoting decent work. And so the ILO's objectives are all around improving the livelihoods of people and their families, creating peace and stability through employment and labour market programs. Of course, we also have a very strong international law system. We have nearly 200 conventions. We have a very strong supervisory system that oversees compliance with those conventions. And the other area that I think is one of our great strengths is the fact that we bring together what we call our tripartite partners, governors, governments, workers and employers, to really look at and try and find solutions to some of the great problems that are facing the world now and have been facing the world over the last 100 years.
In this centenary year of the ILO, one of its major initiatives is the Global Commission on the Future of Work. Can you explain a little bit more what are the priorities and challenges involved in this initiative?
ILO in 2017 established a Global Commission on the Future of Work. We're very pleased that it's being co-chaired by President Ramaphosa of South Africa and Prime Minister Löfven of Sweden, together with 25 experts covering all regions of the world. They've done a very detailed piece of work that was finalised in their report that was released just a month ago in late January of this year. And what they have identified is that with all of the work that's being done around the world, all of the research on the future of work, so far had a very much a technological focus to it. What the challenges, what the threats are of technology and the loss of jobs and the change of jobs and so on. What our Global Commission has done is taken quite a different approach. It's certainly not ignored any of that other work, but has taken it into account, and it's come up with a central theme through its report on the need to take a human-centred approach to the future of work. This means we've got to look at the future of work from the perspective of people, not from the perspective of technology. And in doing that, they've come up with 10 recommendations, which are grouped, if you like, into 3 pillars, as we like to call them. And all of these call for a greater level of global investment by governments, by the private sector, by trade unions, all of those major players in the economy. The first of those 3 pillars is greater investment in the capabilities of people. So this is talking about things like lifelong learning, the need for skill development, the need for identification of what are the future skills. The second pillar they looked at was increasing investment in the institutions of work. And by this, what they mean is that over the last 100 years, in all countries around the world, there have been established institutions that regulate work, that provide for representation of workers and employers, that provide safety nets. In Australia, the Fair Work Commission, labour inspection services, all of these. I think it's widely recognised that over the last several decades, the value or the strength and the funding of these organisations has diminished significantly. and we're seeing a much stronger move towards informal economy. We often see the reports of abuse of employees through the non-proper payment of wages and so on. So what we're suggesting is, in a broad sense, there needs to be a much greater investment in these fundamental institutions that govern work, and a much greater role for government to be playing. And then in the third one is an increased investment in the creation of decent and sustainable work. And this all relates to identifying what are the future skills that are going to be needed. Whilst we hear a lot of doom and gloom about the impact of technology, we've also got to consider the new jobs that are going to be created as we have that transition into a carbon neutral economy. The jobs that are going to be created when we talk about the massive demographic changes across the world. In some areas it will be new care jobs looking after the elderly, in others it will be new jobs providing support to young people. And what the Commission has identified that the world needs to do is really look at how we can take, from a people-centred approach, the opportunity that the future of work presents, rather than just all getting concerned about the threats that are also inherent in it.
I think that's all very important, and I wonder, we're sitting here in the centre of a global business, Monash Business School, to what extent universities and university research and education may inform and be useful for the work that you do at the ILO?
Well, for the work we do generally, but also for the work that we will need to do around the future of work, I think academic institutions, universities are going to be critical. We're a relatively small organisation. We have a small research department. We need to establish the networks and rely on the work that is done at organisations like Monash Business School. Certainly in the past there's been a very strong relationship, work that you yourself have done, your colleagues in the international consortium that have done. We highly value that. I recall that as recently as 2015 there was a great deal of work that was done by colleagues here at Monash Business on the work that the ILO was doing on the informal economy. It resulted in 2015 in a new international instrument providing guidance on how do we formalise the informal economy. I think as we move forward into the implementation of the Global Commission report, there will be a great deal more work around how do we get proper engagement between workers and employer representatives. How do we get proper tripartite engagement? When we're talking about trying to roll this out across the world, we will increasingly need the support from organisations like Monash Business.
Well, thank you. I think you're referring there to some of the work being done by our good colleagues Professor Fang Lee Cook and Professor Richard Mitchell and others here at the Monash Business School, which has helped to inform the ILO and has been cited in the report and at your big annual conference. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Professor Fang Lee Cook and Professor Mitchell, together with yourself, I think the three of you are very familiar names at the ILO. You are referred to in many of our reports, and certainly I know from my colleagues in our research and policy departments there is a great deal of reliance on work that's done here. And I think particularly you and your colleagues have been able to provide a great deal of insight for us in this region, in Australia's important region in Southeast Asia and also in the Pacific Island countries. These are both very different environments. When we look at countries where Monash has done a lot of work, in Vietnam, in Japan, in Korea, in China, massive growth potential. They've got huge development problems as well, and labour relations, ILO type issues are incredibly important in that development. And then on the other hand, we've got the different but hugely significant challenges for the Pacific Island countries. They're small countries, they're not at this stage able to take the great benefit that technology has. In many cases they're isolated and they're losing a lot of their young people. And I think some of the work that colleagues here at Monash have been doing around how can these small countries, these relatively isolated countries, make the most of technology, how can they become almost technology hubs in their own right to create jobs, to keep their young people in country and to ensure their economic development and stability as well. So it is incredibly important work.
We've been doing some work helping to advise the University of the South Pacific, for example, which is a multinational university covering a range of small Pacific Island countries centred on Fiji.
Yes, that's right. And our Pacific Island country office is indeed in Fiji, and it covers the whole of the sub-region. There's a close collaboration between our office and the university, and I think that's something that we would be looking to try and expand that, particularly, as I say, as we're rolling out the Future of Work report and we're looking at how those countries can benefit from some of the signposts that are in this report.
Given that sustainable development and responsible growth are at the core of the ILO's and Monash University's mission, how would you like Monash Business School and other universities to work with the ILO more closely to advance the ILO's more global agenda?
Well, I think there is a huge opportunity for that, and you refer to sustainable development, and of course the United Nations 2030 Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, for the first time have identified decent work, basically the ILO's mandate, as one of the core international development priorities. And as part of us working with the rest of the UN system, we need to have the support, be able to benefit from the work that is being done at universities like Monash. We are increasingly establishing networks right around the world, and I know Monash has those networks. We need to be able to play in a much stronger way because it benefits not only the ILO, but it benefits the whole of the UN system and indeed the universities when we can establish these sort of relationships because of the enormous challenge that is faced by the world and the reason for the Sustainable Development Goals, so that together international organisations, academic institutions can provide support, they can provide advice, they can assist in policy development of all countries right around the world.
There seems to be a growth in populism around the world. I'm thinking of Trump and Brexit. Polarisation seems to be increasing between employers and workers and their representatives. And I wonder to what extent you might see that in the ILO's governing body and how you're able to overcome this sort of polarisation to try and achieve consensus to formulate and implement new policies and practices at the ILO, which are so important for working people and business around the world.
Well, as I indicated earlier, tripartism is the essence of the ILO. Everything we do is based on dialogue between governments, representatives of workers and representatives of employers. So it's part of our DNA to work in that environment. If you look at the history of the last 100 years while the ILO has been in existence, we came out of the First World War, we survived the Second World War, we worked with workers and employers right through the Cold War, and we're still doing that now with all of the turmoil all around the world. And I think the one consistent thing right through that 100 years that has shown to have worked, that has shown to have come up with good economic and social policies is social dialogue. And by that I mean governments, workers and employers sitting down around the table and addressing these key issues. Now certainly even within the ILO's own governance bodies, a lot of that tension in these relationships that we see internationally and in individual countries do occur in the ILO. But I think that we don't give up hope on the value of social dialogue. And indeed, and very importantly, the Global Commission on the Future of Work, in parts of their discussion on social dialogue, indicated that it must start to be seen as a public good. That is, it must be valued by governments, it must be valued by the community as a real mechanism to bring the major players of not only the economic development but also the social development of the country. And the ILO has a unique role that it can build on what improvements are made at a national level to bring that to a global level. And that's what we seek to do week in, week out, through our governing body meetings, through our international labour conferences, and through all of the technical support that we give to governments, to unions and to employer organisations.
Well, thanks very much, Greg Vines, for sparing the time to come to Monash Business School today, and we'll be able to share this interview and discussion with our students, alumni and other stakeholders. So thank you again.
It's been a great pleasure, Greg, and certainly, again, I'll just say how much we appreciate the relationship with Monash Business School, and we look forward to extending that relationship into the future.